The winter wind howled through the narrow alleyways of the city, slicing through Marcus's tattered layers like icy blades as he crouched near the corner of a boarded-up bakery, desperately trying to shield himself from the cold that gnawed at his bones. Every day felt like a battle for survival, and every night was a relentless reminder of how fragile life had become. Hunger was a constant companion, and the sounds of distant traffic mixed with the occasional shout from the streets reminded him that the world moved on without him. Marcus had long since mastered the art of invisibility, of blending into the shadows, of moving quietly past those who either ignored him or tossed him a coin with a glance of disdain. Yet today, something unusual disturbed the monotony of his existence. A sleek black limousine rolled silently into view, its polished surface gleaming in the weak winter sunlight as it came to an abrupt halt a few yards away from where he huddled. Out stepped a man dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, the kind of outfit that radiated authority, wealth, and a sense of untouchable arrogance. His shoes clicked against the wet pavement, and the sound seemed to reverberate through the alley like a warning. The millionaire clapped his hands, as though orchestrating some grand performance, and then called out in a voice both loud and patronizing, "Hey, you there. Yes, you. I have a gift for you." Marcus froze, his heart skipping a beat. A gift? For him? He hadn't felt the weight of attention like this in years, and the sudden, almost absurd, offer made him cautious. The man gestured dramatically toward the back of the limousine, and as Marcus's eyes adjusted, he saw it. A horse. Not just any horse, but one that looked as though it had suffered through too many winters. Its fur patchy and dull, ribs faintly visible beneath its coat, and eyes clouded with confusion and fear. The creature shifted nervously on its hooves, letting out a low, raspy whinny that seemed to echo Marcus's own uncertainty. The millionaire's lips curled into a smirk, the kind that conveyed superiority and amusement at someone else's misfortune. "I thought you might enjoy this," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "A magnificent creature, all yours to keep." He stepped back and laughed, a harsh, theatrical sound that bounced off the alley walls, before climbing back into his car and driving away, leaving Marcus alone with the horse and a swirl of snowflakes drifting lazily in the cold air. Marcus stared at the animal, the absurdity of the situation settling over him like a heavy cloak. He had no stable, no food, no idea how to care for a horse, yet here it was, an unasked-for companion, abandoned just as he had been, thrust into his fragile world with no warning. Tentatively, he stepped closer, extending a trembling hand to stroke the coarse mane, and felt a shiver run through both himself and the horse. The horse flinched but didn't bolt, and Marcus felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years: connection. He whispered softly, "Well, I guess it's just you and me now." That night, Marcus scrambled to find something to make the horse comfortable. Using old crates and worn blankets he had salvaged, he constructed a small, makeshift stall in a hidden corner behind the alley. He scoured the neighborhood, dragging home whatever he could find: discarded hay, spoiled vegetables, even crusts of bread, to feed the animal he decided to name Chance, a reminder that even the smallest flicker of hope was worth holding on to. The horse, awkward and untrained, wandered the makeshift enclosure, occasionally nudging Marcus with a muzzle that was more inquisitive than threatening, and Marcus spoke to him as though the animal could understand every word. He told Chance about the streets, about the nights he had gone hungry, about the cold and the loneliness, about the strange twist of fate that had thrown this horse into his life. As the hours passed, Marcus began to realize that while the horse had been presented as a joke, a useless object of mockery, its presence stirred something within him, a sense of responsibility, of purpose, of life beyond mere survival. He laughed quietly to himself, a hollow sound at first, then more genuine as he watched Chance attempt to nibble on the meager scraps of food, his hooves kicking up dust and bits of paper. The horse's awkwardness mirrored Marcus's own clumsy attempts to navigate this unexpected responsibility, and in that shared struggle, a bond began to form. Days turned into nights, and Marcus found himself rising earlier, planning how to feed and care for Chance, scavenging through alleys and abandoned lots for anything edible, even negotiating with shopkeepers for leftovers or stale bread. Slowly, The horse's dull eyes began to glimmer with life. He began to recognize Marcus's voice, to respond to his gentle commands, and to trust the hands that fed and soothed him. Marcus realized that he was not just surviving anymore. He was nurturing, creating a tiny ecosystem of care in a world that had long since ignored him. The absurdity of the situation faded into the background, replaced by a sense of wonder and determination. Marcus understood that what had been given as a mockery had become a catalyst for change, a reminder that even in the bleakest circumstances, resilience and compassion could transform the meaningless into something profoundly valuable. And as the first snow of winter settled over the city, blanketing the alley in a cold, sparkling quiet, Marcus stood beside Chance, feeling a warmth he hadn't known in years, whispering, "We'll be all right, old friend. Somehow we'll make it through." Days turned into weeks, and the initial chaos of Marcus and Chance's uneasy companionship began to settle into a strange rhythm, one dictated by survival, patience, and the fragile trust between man and horse. The streets, once hostile and indifferent, started to feel less like an endless gauntlet and more like a canvas on which Marcus could quietly sketch a new life, one step at a time. Each morning, he awoke before the city stirred, rubbing the sleep from his eyes and scanning the alley for whatever scraps he could find. He had discovered that the old bakery dumpsters, once empty and unwelcoming, now occasionally held loaves deemed unsellable, broken pastries, and even jars of spoiled preserves that, with careful cleaning, became meals. Marcus learned to ration not only for himself but for Chance, measuring portions with meticulous care, feeding the horse first, often going hungry himself, knowing that Chance depended on him. Their bond deepened in ways Marcus had never anticipated. Chance would nuzzle his shoulder when he seemed down, and Marcus began to speak aloud to the horse as though he were confiding in a trusted friend, recounting memories of family lost, friends who had abandoned him, and dreams that seemed too distant to ever touch. In return, Chance offered warmth and a steady presence, a silent reassurance that even in the absence of human kindness, connection could exist. Word of the homeless man with a horse began to ripple through the neighborhood, carried in whispers by those who had seen Marcus leading the mangy creature through the streets, guiding him carefully, ensuring he didn't stumble on broken glass or slip on icy patches. At first, the attention was subtle. Curious glances, children pointing from sidewalks, the occasional passerby shaking their head in disbelief. But as Marcus and Chance became a fixture of the alley, some began to stop, to offer stale bread, blankets, or scraps of hay. Others took photos, posting them online, framing the pair as a symbol of resilience in a world that often overlooked the vulnerable. Marcus, initially wary of attention, soon realized that the small acts of kindness from strangers were helping him sustain Chance and himself. He discovered abandoned lots where water pooled and grass still grew despite the concrete jungle surrounding them. Here, he trained Chance to move more confidently, to trust the environment, and to respond to simple commands, learning together through trial and error. The horse, once awkward and uncertain, grew stronger with each passing day, muscles filling out beneath his patchy coat, eyes brightening with recognition and intelligence. Marcus, in turn, found a purpose that transcended mere survival. He mapped out their days carefully, finding routes that were safe for Chance, timing the scavenging trips to avoid confrontations with other street dwellers, and even negotiating with small shopkeepers for food in exchange for cleaning storefronts or sweeping the sidewalks. He became known in the neighborhood not as a homeless man, but as a caretaker, someone whose commitment to his companion demanded respect despite his lack of wealth. One evening, as the city's lights flickered on and shadows stretched long across cracked pavements, Marcus sat beside Chance, brushing the horse's mane with a rag he had washed dozens of times. Children from nearby streets had begun to linger, timidly approaching to touch the horse or offer handfuls of leftover vegetables. Marcus explained gently how to feed Chance, how to be patient, how to speak softly, and the children listened, eyes wide, absorbing the lessons not just in caring for an animal, but in empathy and responsibility. The alley, once a symbol of neglect and despair, began to feel alive. Marcus felt a subtle shift in the energy around him. The harsh voices of the street faded into the background, replaced by laughter, whispered encouragements, and the occasional clatter of a distant bicycle. He realized that through chance, he was no longer invisible. People noticed his efforts, sometimes marveling at how a man with nothing could sustain something so seemingly impossible. Marcus himself was astonished by his own resilience. Tasks that would have seemed insurmountable weeks ago, the hauling of water, the collection of hay, the careful tending of a fragile creature, had become part of a rhythm that gave his life structure, dignity, and meaning. Each day, he learned more about patience, about strategy, and about the delicate art of balancing survival with compassion. At night, when the alley fell silent except for the occasional hum of distant traffic, Marcus would sit beside Chance and speak in low tones, recounting stories he imagined for the horse, creating a world of possibilities that extended beyond the grime and struggle of their immediate reality. He spoke of fields with soft grass, of warm barns with cozy corners, of humans who treated animals with care rather than mockery. And as he spoke, Chance would lean into him, pressing his forehead gently against Marcus's chest, offering comfort in a way that only an animal with unwavering trust could provide. Marcus began to understand that this relationship, born from a joke intended to humiliate, had become a lifeline. The horse, useless in the eyes of the millionaire who had given him as a jest, was invaluable to Marcus, not because of what he could do materially, but because of the lessons, companionship, and purpose he had provided. Marcus also noticed subtle changes in himself. The hopelessness that had clung to him like a second skin began to lift. He walked taller, spoke more confidently, and began to see solutions where he had once seen only obstacles. The street, harsh and indifferent, no longer seemed entirely hostile. Even the millionaire's mockery, which had lingered in Marcus's memory at first as a sting of humiliation, now seemed distant, almost irrelevant. What mattered was not the intention behind the gift, but the life Marcus could carve from it. He began experimenting with small innovations, scavenging leftover fruit from the market to feed Chance, building small protective barriers against rain, and creating rudimentary toys to keep the horse engaged. Each act of creativity strengthened their bond and reinforced Marcus's own sense of agency. By the end of the second week, Marcus and Chance had developed a subtle harmony, a silent understanding of each other's movements and moods. Marcus could anticipate when Chance was tired, when he needed water, when he craved human touch. Chance, in turn, responded with soft whinnies and gentle nudges, guiding Marcus through the streets as if to say, "We are in this together." In that small, evolving ecosystem, Marcus found something he had not known he missed: purpose, dignity, and the quiet triumph of nurturing life in a world that had almost forgotten him. He realized that what the millionaire had intended as a cruel joke had become, instead, a profound lesson. Even the most useless gifts could become priceless when met with resilience, care, and the willingness to see beyond appearances. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the alley, Marcus stood tall beside Chance, brushing his mane and whispering, "We've come a long way, haven't we? And we'll go farther still." In that moment, Marcus understood that survival was no longer enough. He had discovered purpose, and through it, a life richer than he had ever imagined. Months had passed, and the bitter chill of winter had slowly given way to the tentative warmth of early spring. The streets no longer frozen, yet still carrying the residue of hardship in every crack of concrete and every faded brick wall. Marcus had grown accustomed to the rhythm of his life with Chance. Each day a careful balance of survival, care, and connection. Yet nothing could have prepared him for the subtle transformation that was now unfolding, not just in himself or in the horse, but in the world around them. News of the unlikely duo had traveled beyond the narrow alleyways, shared through whispers, photographs, and social media posts that portrayed Marcus not as a helpless man, but as a figure of quiet resilience, a testament to determination and empathy. Children came more frequently now, their laughter echoing through the streets as they offered carrots, scraps of bread, or simply their gentle attention to Chance, who had become the center of a small, improvisational community. Shopkeepers who had once ignored Marcus began to greet him warmly, offering not just food but small tokens of encouragement: blankets, sacks of hay, old grooming brushes, all donations, all gestures acknowledging the life he had nurtured against impossible odds. Marcus marveled at the transformation. The alley, once a symbol of neglect and despair, now felt alive, vibrant with the energy of those who had chosen to care. And yet, amidst this quiet success, a new presence stirred the air, one Marcus had learned to anticipate with a mixture of apprehension and disbelief. The millionaire, the man who had gifted him a horse as a cruel joke, had returned. His limousine, sleek and intimidating as ever, glided to a stop at the edge of the alley, its tinted windows reflecting the early morning sun. Marcus froze, instincts honed by months of survival telling him to remain cautious, to hide, to retreat. But he didn't. Instead, he stood beside Chance, shoulders squared, chin lifted, heart steady. The millionaire stepped out, his polished shoes echoing against the pavement, and for the first time, Marcus noticed an expression on his face that was unfamiliar: hesitation. His usual arrogance was absent, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty, as if he were stepping into a world he no longer controlled. Marcus's gaze met his, calm yet unyielding, and the millionaire faltered, as though the reality before him had outstripped anything he could have imagined. Children and neighbors watched silently, the murmurs of curiosity and awe mingling with the crisp spring air. The horse, Chance, stood tall and alert, his once mangy coat now glistening faintly in the morning light, muscles toned, eyes bright, a reflection of months of care, trust, and resilience. Marcus extended a hand toward the horse, and Chance responded with a gentle nuzzle, a display of loyalty and connection that transcended the initial absurdity of their meeting. The millionaire's face tightened. He had expected to see a joke fulfilled, a man struggling, perhaps embarrassed or defeated. Instead, he saw triumph, quiet, uncelebrated, and unshakable. The realization struck him with a weight he had never anticipated. What he had intended as mockery had become a story of courage, empathy, and transformation. Words failed him. He opened his mouth, searching for something. An apology, perhaps, or a statement of superiority. But none came. The power dynamic he had assumed was shattered. Marcus spoke first, his voice calm, measured, and strong. "You gave me this horse as a joke. You thought it was useless. But look at him now, and look at what we've built together. Your intention doesn't define the value. Our actions do." The millionaire swallowed hard, glancing around at the small crowd that had gathered, at the children smiling as they patted Chance, at the neighbors who now regarded Marcus with respect and admiration. Each glance, each detail compounded the sense of his own misjudgment. Marcus continued, explaining how he had cared for Chance, the nights spent scavenging food, the days of training, the community that had formed around them. There was no anger in his tone, only quiet pride and the unshakable knowledge that he had turned what was meant to humiliate into something meaningful. The millionaire shifted uneasily, suddenly aware of how little control he truly had over the narrative he had created. Marcus's resilience and the loyalty of Chance had rewritten the story, rendering his own wealth and influence irrelevant in the face of empathy and perseverance. Children approached the millionaire cautiously, offering him carrots or scraps for Chance, and the man flinched at the genuine innocence of their gestures, realizing that true value could not be purchased, displayed, or mocked. He tried again to speak, this time his words awkward and halting, but Marcus's steady presence silenced him, not with anger, but with the quiet authority of earned dignity. The millionaire's eyes lingered on the horse, now vibrant and strong, a living testament to the care and effort invested by someone he had once dismissed as powerless. In that moment, he understood the bitter truth of his earlier arrogance. Gifts given without thought can be transformed into miracles when met with courage, compassion, and dedication. Marcus, sensing the internal conflict of the man who had caused him so much initial frustration, offered no lecture, only a subtle acknowledgement of the lesson, that intentions alone are meaningless without understanding, effort, and heart. As the crowd dispersed, the millionaire retreated to his limousine, humbled and reflective, carrying with him a lesson far more valuable than any possession he could have offered. Marcus and Chance remained in the alley, now vibrant and full of life, surrounded by children, neighbors, and the warmth of a community he had cultivated from the most improbable beginnings. Marcus brushed Chance's mane gently, whispering words of pride and encouragement, feeling a sense of accomplishment that no amount of wealth could have afforded him. The horse nudged him, as if affirming that together, they had conquered more than hunger and cold. They had claimed purpose, dignity, and a place in a world that had once overlooked them. The sun rose higher, spilling golden light over the alley, highlighting the transformation of a space once abandoned into a haven of hope. Marcus stood tall, shoulders squared, heart full, knowing that what began as a cruel joke had become an extraordinary journey, one that had tested limits, forged resilience, and revealed the profound truth that value is not in the gift, but in the life breathed into it. As he led Chance through the streets, children running alongside, neighbors waving, and the memory of the millionaire's arrival fading into history, Marcus understood fully that survival had evolved into triumph, mockery had transformed into respect, and life, against all odds, could bloom even from the most unexpected of beginnings. In the quiet moments that followed, Marcus looked down at Chance, feeling the warmth of his companion's breath, and whispered, "We did it. We made it our own, and nothing can take this from us." The horse whinnied softly in reply, and together they moved forward, a testament to resilience, compassion, and the indomitable spirit of those who refuse to be defined by circumstance, proving that even the most ridiculous beginnings can give birth to extraordinary journeys.